Good afternoon. I'm Marianne Wilson, editor of Chain Store Age, and I want to welcome everyone to today's webinar, Strategies to Fast Track Your Retail Construction, which is being sponsored by Sevan. Before we start, just a few brief housekeeping points. Please feel free to use the Q&A function to send questions throughout the presentation. It's on the left side of your screen, down below the presenter headshots. We'll field as many questions as we can at the end of the formal remarks. If we don't have time to answer all of the questions, our sponsor will follow up by email after the session ends. Also, you can use the section down on the left if you have any technical questions about the webinar itself, and you'll get a reply from our webinar producer. Finally, if you want to review this webinar later or share it with your colleagues, a replay will be available on the Chain Store Age site within about 2 hours of our conclusion today, and it will remain available there for several months. Okay, that does it for the housekeeping. Let's get on with today's webinar. Here with us today to kick off things is Tommy Hitchcock, Director, Business Development at Sevan. Tommy?
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity and the introduction. We want to kick off today by just telling you who's going to be speaking with you today. As she said, I'm Tommy Hitchcock, Director of Business Development for Sevan Multi-Site Solutions. With me is Peter. He is our Director of Architecture. He leads one of our 3 architecture studios. With over 15 years of experience across retail, food service, and hospitality sectors, Peter brings a wealth of knowledge to this conversation today. Nick is our SVP of Operations. He has been with the company for over 15 years, leading our technology, data, analytics departments, reality capture and BIM services, civil zoning and permitting, and architecture and engineering. He has his hands full. Together, they'll be doing the majority of the talking today, which is, I promise, good for y'all. Just for a moment as to who Sevan is, for those of you that may not have any insight as to who Sevan Multi-Site Solutions is, we are an industry leader in retail program and construction management. Simply, we make and manage change for global brands, creating speed and scale for our clients' programs. You see a small handful of our clients here with over 60 plus national retail clients. We are focused on educating and leading them on programs that lead to expansion, change, and updates. Today, we're going to focus on civil zoning and permitting, reality capture, and architecture and engineering. These 3 core disciplines within Sevan are going to be the key to our conversation today. Specifically, using those 3 departments, we run remodels, reimages, rebrands, and new builds for a large variety of retail clients. The key to the conversation today, though, is how we are helping them move their activities through these processes in a more rapid and effective manner, specifically helping them hold their schedules, shorten and knocking down their budgets, and minimizing their change orders. The specific objectives we'd like to hit today as a team is we would like to focus on current trends in retail construction and design, programming, planning for accelerated outcomes, leveraging the power of reality capture, dynamic solutions to maximize space, time, and budget, and then the ugly one, entitlement and permitting strategies to tackle regulatory hurdles. This is one of the key factors in slowing down programs today, and we're hoping to help with some insight. I'm going to hand the program over to Peter and Nick. They will take over from this point.
Thank you for that, Tommy. Greetings to all. I'm Nick Peters. Thank you for joining us today. And we're going to start off with a quick look at current trends. Long ago, before I did any of this work in our industry. I was a high school history teacher, believe it or not. So I've always kind of been fascinated by the cycles of cause and effect and continued cause and effect. If we think about consumer behavior, for that matter, really government behavior, changes and evolutions are often driven by macroeconomic and technological shifts. And then from time to time, even impactful externalities. Those consumer and government behaviors then drive design changes, and the cycle continues. So certainly in the last 10 to 15 years, we've had our share of change, thinking about digital transformation, COVID, post-COVID, supply constraints, inflationary environments, and of course, continued focus on sustainable practices and uses. So with all of that in mind, Peter's going to briefly discuss some of the corresponding current design trends.
Thank you, Nick. So, well, hello, everyone. So what is the biggest and ongoing design trend that we are seeing? If you're thinking cost efficiency, you are correct. Cost savings is an ongoing conversation. We want to maintain quality of the brand for less money, quicker turnaround time, while also maintaining the brand integrity. The cost efficiency is not just realized in the material store, but also throughout the entire process of design and construction. We'll get into some of these more detailed points further on into this presentation. So let's talk about store format and smaller footprints. Our retail establishments are getting smaller, less need for sprawling sales floor or large lounging seating area. We are looking to focus the consumer on the products that are high sellers, while also immediately displaying new product rollouts. We are moving quicker throughout the store and checking out faster. So speed is a big conversation that we are seeing. Going into hybrid shopping. So how are we moving quicker through the store? Hybrid shopping is a leader in this conversation. When we are not at the physical store, typically we are usually shopping the products online and placing our orders for delivery. We are able to get everything we need at our doorstep. How does that translate to the physical store? Well, mainly that we are exposed to these products early in the process. A lot of times when we enter a store, we know what we're getting. We are there to get, and we know what these products are. Retail companies analyze this and are able to better determine their physical store priorities. So when you get to your coffee shop and order your, let's say, triple shot vanilla sweet cream upside down latte with exactly 2.5 spoons of sugar, you're not ordering that at the counter. You're ordering that on your phone. You're coming in and you're picking up that order. So now your time spent at the establishment is cut in half. Moving on to outdoor spaces. One thing that COVID pushed further along is outdoor areas. Whether a coffee shop, retail store, big box store, if we have an inviting space to unwind at, consumers will gravitate towards that establishment. Through design, we want to create that moment of calm. I know for me, when I go to these stores or a quick service restaurant, if there's an outdoor space, I'm usually going to that one. And lastly, immersive experiences. So this is a big leader in decreasing our footprints by adding opportunities of interaction by the consumer. Just because we have less product at the sales floor does not mean that product is not displayed at the store. It's just this could be displayed interactively through media, through the consumer interaction within the store, at the millwork or at the kiosks. Consumers can also now do more themselves through technology, whether it be self-checkout kiosks, mobile, phone orders, even requesting sizes at the stores can all be done directly by the consumer through technology. So the capabilities of the in-store consumer keeps increasing. If we go to the next slide. So let's elaborate on some of these trends more specifically in cost savings. As you all see, checkout counters and ordering channels. Whether it be at a coffee shop, retail store, food establishment, our checkout counters are getting smaller. Less square footage is being allocated for this larger counter, giving space back to the sales floor or decreasing the footprint. Self-checkout kiosks are being installed in almost any retail establishment you go into, even clothing stores. More consumers can flow through the checkout process quicker. Since they take up less square footage, we can also implement more checkout. So the customers / consumers getting out the door faster. even things that you might not think of that are at the consumer's capability. Security alarm tags you see at retail clothing stores are being developed at the consumer checkout area. So the consumer is taking off the security tags themselves. So ordering kiosk units allow for faster, more precise ordering. The ordering screens allow for the product to be shown to you. So when you order, you can customize it, you see what you're getting, and you're not holding up the main counter line. As for architects, we need to work with the client on an in-depth level to determine how to best organize these checkout channels, control circulation, and minimize these bottlenecks. That is the key, and that is the trend that's moving forward. Minimize, increase circulation, increase speed. Moving down to drive-thrus quickly. Drive-thrus are not just for quick service food retailers. Our pharmacies have drive-thrus. Our mobile pickup areas are drive-thrus, whether they're by runners or by VAT tube deliveries or other technologies. We are designing this store to accommodate these drive-thru capabilities, both away from the building and at the building face. We are increasing the lane count to be able to accommodate the quantity of consumers. We want to get more orders in, process quicker, and navigate the consumer to the next window. As you see more and more, digital lanes are popping up in order to bypass the drive-through lanes, so that when you order your product ahead of time, you're bypassing the drive-through and going straight to a pickup window or a designated area for that runner to bring the product out to you. Jumping on to interiors. For interiors, as I mentioned before, the guest experience is being enhanced and optimized. When the consumer enters the store, product display priorities are emphasized. The consumer should clearly see the organization of the store and be able to find their way to where they want to go. This is where sightlines are important. This consumer came in for a reason. We do not want to frustrate them. That is the key. If they can circulate to their destination while also being exposed to other merchandise, it is a win for both parties. Touching quickly up on seating. Seating typology is important. Example, at a quick service restaurant, usually you'll have more single or two-person groups come into restaurants, which are these quick service restaurants. So that means we want to accommodate more two-person seatings. The biggest spatial waste is a six-person table that is used by one person. As I mentioned earlier, smaller footprints are a real focus also moving forward. Smaller footprints means less expenses on all levels through utility, lease fees, and so on. Through technology and millwork design, we can squeeze the same amount of visibility of product in a smaller amount of space. Jumping down to adaptive reuse. This is a big topic as more spaces are being repurposed, especially after COVID. What once was an office space is now a retail store or a showroom or a bank. Through proper design and collaboration, we incorporate a brand's image and desired aesthetic into almost any existing space. Also, when we can work with the jurisdiction in the beginning of the project process, we can work through zoning and permitting hurdles up front to avoid schedule bottlenecks later. We'll touch up on this later on in this presentation. Doing proper due diligence of the space being repurposed. When we analyze the existing infrastructure in the beginning, we can determine what we can reuse and what we need to install new, minimizing costs and change orders later. Adaptive reuse also allows, this is a big one, allows for the brand to be better integrate itself into the community. We do not want to go against the grain of a community and frustrate the consumer. Really quickly on back of house storage areas. Easily adjustable storage units allows for adapting to seasonal products. We don't want to waste shelf space, small products on large shelves and squeezing in large products in small spaces. Track type storage racks are gaining even more traction. That allows for more capacity within a smaller footprint. And lastly, on this slide, low contact conveniences, as I mentioned earlier. This is a popular trend. It keeps developing both on our side as architects, but also via research on the client side, on the brand side. We want to move faster and easier throughout the store, whether it be through our phones, through kiosks, interactive displays, and so on. These low contact technologies are also being designed to be standalone units so that they can be easily relocated and reinserted into different millwork topologies or different store locations as the store adjusts itself or adapts within its different life cycles. If we go to the next slide. So stepping outside of the building, building elevations are becoming more streamlined with cleaner lines, more distinguishable features. This allows for branding to stand out and be more defined. We also have cleaner transitions between materials with less clutter, less overruns, less mess. All this leads to cost savings due to simplification of installation, as well as speeds up installation times. With a more streamlined facade, we can also incorporate more prefabricated components. Signage elements, accent towers, entire building sections can be produced in a warehouse and brought on site. Modular design and installation is also gaining traction. An entire standalone store can be brought on site in 12-foot sections, including the roof structure up to the decking. From there, interior installation and signage and roofing can be installed. This greatly cuts down the installation and construction time, as well as eliminates errors within the construction itself. As for signage, this is still very strict, and it's the hardest to get through when it comes to jurisdictions. So through logos rather than wording, we can push the boundary of what is considered signage. Lighting elements can be used as signage, and vehicle can be qualified as lighting fixtures. Building materials, colors, their orientation can be developed to match branding, allowing for building brand identity through other means outside of logos and just directly mounted signage. Stepping down for the site, new wayfinding tactics are being incorporated every day, including asphalt paving colors, landscaping design, and specific placement of parking stalls. EV charging is also being introduced into site design. Having dedicated charging stalls allows for additional consumer traffic. And lastly, with multiple businesses, usually on the single complex, brands are coordinating together and should coordinate together to create synergy and circulation and wayfinding. This helps to minimize the frustration of the consumer. And really, lastly on this side quickly, prefabrication. This is the biggest trend, as I mentioned earlier. Various interior elements can be prefabricated offsite and brought to the building when available. Millwork can be plugged in within the overall wall construction, including stubbed for power from a single power source. This will increase construction speed as well as quality. This can also extend to wall assemblies, especially complex ones. Inspections do come into play in the wall assemblies, so it depends on how that wall is qualified, but that can be included and help speed up the construction process. Ceiling features, along with placeholders for lighting, can be developed off-sites. Ceiling structures would be prepped prior to installation to minimize conflicts. And the last one on this one is trash enclosures. Always a conversation, always a tough jurisdictional review to make sure it's per code. So if we can work with our clients to standardize and modularize their trash enclosures, they can be easily fitted to meet specific site requirements. This modularizing also includes materials as well, as every jurisdiction has its own requirements. So the more we can prefab, the more we can modularize, the better, and the more we can save in cost and schedule. I'll throw it back over to Nick here.
Thank you for that, Peter. And considering all of those things, businesses are consistently adapting and adjusting, leading to initiatives that require construction programs and rollouts that facilitate those initiatives. We'll spend an awful lot of our time talking about design and due diligence and permitting elements of those rollouts, but would be remiss not to hit on the importance of programmatic planning and methods that can accelerate results. Sports analogies being too easy, I'll use one that we need to create our field of play. We need to kind of create and understand the rules, and then we need to put together a playbook that guides well-synchronized activities amongst a diverse set of stakeholders. So things like communication plans, escalation, roles and responsibilities, process and workflows, decision trees, safe work methods, document storage, and frankly, digital security is a big one. So all elements of strong programmatic planning. And really it starts with ensuring there's a common platform. Dynamic programs aren't really tracked, they're driven. And to drive a program, that means real-time management, dashboarding, insightful visualizations, and most importantly, probably very tight data-driven feedback loops, automated workflows and templatized forms and tools, all fuel efficient work. And of course, they also help the creation of strong master budgets and schedules that could provide for predictability. And then there's some items that aren't really thought about as readily, things like issues logs and risk registers. And those are really designed to help identify and solve problems early, or really better yet, find and solve the problem before it's actually a problem. And a key driver to much of this that we'll discuss a bit further is in the design area, standards and operating guidelines. Peter, throw it right back to you to talk a bit about how that can play into our program playbook.
Yep. Thank you, Nick. So, yeah, talking about clear design approval workflows, very important. When we understand when we submit for approvals, whether it's to the client, to the jurisdictions, it helps streamline the process. Also, who are the decision makers? Everyone, we all know everyone has a say, likes to have a say, but we need to identify those decision makers to streamline that process, because then we get that information from one source. Going down to if-then design alternatives. This is key. If we can establish route trees as we're designing or making decisions, that leads to less questions coming from us to the client, from the construction managers, and so on. So if this situation pops up, we have different avenues to take. And if those are defined earlier in the process, we have a source to go to. Going over to the dynamic use of program RFI logs. This is mainly if we have visibility, if everyone has a visibility to RFI logs, everyone sees what is happening earlier on in the process. We can disperse those RFI logs to the appropriate individuals to respond to, so that we get the correct answers immediately. And then also it's tracked. So then when these things might pop up later on in the process, we have something to go back towards. Why was the decision made? Why was a change made? Why was a question asked? We can track that, and then everyone in real time can see that. And then going down to analytics on plan review comments. In a program, in multi-site especially, you get through a few projects, you see what are some commonalities in review comments. We can analyze those, we can integrate those into upcoming projects, minimize those comments later. Yes, every jurisdiction is different, but a lot of times, a lot of these comments keep popping up. So if we eliminate those comments, get them into the drawings, get them into the coordination with the jurisdiction, we're going to avoid those comments later on, and then speed up the permitting approval process greatly. So I'll throw it back over to Nick.
When we talk about accelerating a program, perhaps the most important item to think about is developing the pipeline. We need to really intelligently build that pipeline. And central to developing the pipeline is to understand the current state. What exists at our locations right now? That means unlocking the power of reality capture tools and methods so that we could capture on-site data and get that off-site into deliverables from which program and project stakeholders can further build on in a collaborative way. And when we think about reality capture, at Sevan, we really kind of think about it in three tranches of data and corresponding output. We think about visual data, and that will become a deliverable of a virtual tour where you can, from a remote location, really walk through a 360 immersive experience through that building or store or restaurant. We think about the second tranche, spatial data, LiDAR-based point clouds, existing conditions drawings, the things that are really going to provide the basis for the foundation for design and construction documentation. And then the third tranche is a little more general, but quantitative and qualitative data. So facility conditions reports, asset inventories, might do ADA assessments. In thinking about quantitative versus quantitative, I've got 20 lights here, and those lights are this model number and this type. and it's factual information. Qualitative, I might estimate the useful life or the condition of those components. And that could be really important because all buildings are made of components. All components have some shelf life, but then they're not all equal. So addressing different components as it relates to particular scopes of work is important. And along with thinking about those tranches and the tools that we have to create good deliverables, there's also some other associated tools and methodologies you can use and combine to give the most complete view. So things like asset tagging, thermal measures, flyovers as outputs we can do before and after renderings. And those can all be very useful, creating good outputs for program and project planning. It serves as the basis for things like developing comprehensive and accurate scopes of work, and being able to do the things that you want to do and have confidence on how that will get done. Budgeting and estimating much more accurately. Scheduling and staging practices. These are vital tools for that planning. Of course, we mentioned design and accurate construction drawings. And even in the entitlement and permitting realm, the reality capture tools can provide information that can assist those applications. So while I've focused so far on building pipeline and setting up program and individual projects for success, it would be an important time to note that these same tools can be smartly applied in a post-construction fashion and can provide continuous representation of the site into facilities management and give you a much more continuous view and help manage through the life cycle of a site. And also it can set the stage for easier subsequent rollout when the new initiative comes out. If we go to the next slide, here we go. We'll talk just for a minute. This is we have, as I mentioned, lots of ways of collecting data. Of course, generally speaking, we'll use most commonly terrestrial LiDAR and image scans, but from time to time, drones can offer a good alternative and potentially even a complementary alternative. This could be particularly useful for large buildings and large sites, difficult to access views. And one corresponding benefit can be that it reduces safety risk of working at heights when it's applied. So we can move to the next slide. So a point of emphasis is, well, we've covered a lot of the how, what the tools are, what the applications are. BIM services, reality capture and BIM services applied correctly really will generate a healthy return on the investment, from increasing speed of execution, reducing subsequent travel, facilitating design and scope of work decisions, optimizing rollout of projects, providing the accurate basis for construction documentation, and even informing the bidding process and avoid change orders. Every dollar that is spent on reality capture efforts, really the way we view it, should come back 5 to 10-fold, if not more. So next slide, please. So developing the pipeline does go beyond reality capture, as important as that is. Fortunately or unfortunately, beyond just the physical conditions of the space, there's also the governing bodies that have a heavy influence on any construction rollout. And whether it's starting from a greenfield, a remodel of an existing facility, or even a small equipment or fixturing initiative, understanding the regulatory environment is essential. And in that, a proper investigation report for planning, zoning, or permitting really should inform on the following items. It should be process-oriented. What what are the approvals needed and how do I get them? It should cover duration. How long should I really be expecting to go from point of initial submittals through final approvals? And it should inform of cost, both the cost of the submittals themselves, the permit fees, the application fees, et cetera, and then the different players and sub-consultants that might be needed, especially that comes into play with trickier entitlement type pursuits where you really need to assemble an entitlements team because to get what you want may be highly complex or even contentious at times. And then finally, it really should inform on the probabilities or obstacles to hit those project objectives. And that's important to know because that can also drive decision-making. Again, especially building, health, and fire, not so much that if you have good plan sets, you're going to get permits. It's just a matter of time. But on the entitlement front, there could be uses. You might be going after something that is a special use or by exception, and it could be low probability. But if you take out one element of that, it might move to high probability, and that helps form the decision-making process. So. Based on the desired initiatives or scope of work, these investigation reports would cover down on zoning and use issues, planning and design requirements, transportation, utilities, signage codes, and oftentimes there are some hidden hurdles that people don't really think about, but they can cause some unexpected severe detriments to program or project timelines. Things like existing open permits, conditional or special uses or variances that might actually be invalidated by the proposed work scope if you don't take the proper steps or recognize it. So early investigation and collaboration with the authorities having jurisdiction is really essential to identify and develop the project-based strategies, help you most efficiently get through your project and program objectives. And while technically, sometimes this can be done to a certain extent incognito, it's generally most informative when it can be done openly. Certain times, though, conditions exist where it really has to be done under a veil of anonymity, and that just has to be talked through in advance of those investigations. So with this information in hand across the program sites, or at least in large batches, it can really provide some opportunities program-wide, stacking projects for efficient rollouts, identifying projects with hurdles and risk points, help you deal with planning and zoning or design conflicts early, and give a chance to kind of hit those things before they become contentious with the city and make decisions early. Peter, any additional thoughts on this slide?
No, but I think this slide, what the comments you made informs us to on the next slide that we're going to be presenting here. It's a great transition point. So welcome, hello again. So now we're going to step into the design, development, and construction documentation process. We've identified hurdles that Nick spoke about. We've identified, we've developed the pipeline. We've developed some strategies, some program strategies. Like I said, we've gone through some hurdles. So how do we enhance and streamline the design, development, and construction documentation process, or CD phase? This is usually when all the production happens. So especially during design development, if we have drawing templates in place that are molded to the client or the brand, then production schedules and assignments can be more easily instated. Also, if there is visual coherency between the drawing sets, between all the projects, this speeds up review time both by AORs and by the construction team, and even jurisdictions. Within the drawing mediums, such as AutoCAD or Revit that we all use, the more we generate client-specific drawing blocks, the less errors we will have. We will minimize mistakes and RFIs later on in the process. And then as the client updates, let's say their prototypes, we update our drawing templates and blocks in real time so that we maintain that constant update communication with the client. So as I mentioned earlier, drawing guidelines and processes should be developed in the beginning of the program. This includes if-then scenarios that we talked about earlier, as well as define how we should uniformly move through these two phases. These guidelines that we would develop in the beginning allow for less RFIs from the architects, as well as eliminate guesswork later on. We want to use dynamic tools as much as possible. You see this especially in Revit with their design options features. For example, if designing a store that has a specific operational need or a specific square footage need, specific design options could already be populated in that Revit program to allow for quicker integration into drawings. These design options would be per brand standards to minimize changes later in the design process. This goes a long way with, like I said, eliminating errors, eliminating inconsistencies, and change orders later on. Moving down to information SharePoints. Really quickly, having a central location that houses SharePoint's guidelines, standards, forms, anything that is involved in this process from point A to point Z is beneficial. It minimizes miscommunications, especially email miscommunications. One person might get something, the other person doesn't. Already miscommunication happens. Updates would sit in this SharePoint so that it is communicated through one medium. You want to allow access to all parties to the SharePoints, not just the architects, not just the client, the construction managers, the GCs, whenever you can, the GCs, if they're involved in the project process before. So have them become familiar with these SharePoints. The more eyes, the better. Going down, lead times are always a big issue. So how can we alleviate some lead times? A lot of times you can't order equipment before your GC is on board, but if you can plan accordingly, you can order these during the construction development or the construction document development. How do we do this? We can have real-time schedules, real-time schedule milestones in this phase. Some equipment can be tracked earlier in the process to reduce these lead times. This puts a big emphasis on construction management and client coordination because if you're ordering things earlier on, you want to have that decision made and consistent and will not change later on. Quickly going into the drawing blockouts. Not everything needs to be in the drawing set to run through permitting. If you are on a tight deadline, tight schedule, we can have what we call drawing blockouts. A lot of times it's used for millwork. The millwork can be then captured in an interior decor package or a millwork package. If it doesn't affect building code requirements or jurisdiction requirements, these details can be generated later on in the design process, especially if they are possibly holding up submitting for permitting. And then going down to coordination milestones. Having clearly defined coordination milestones helps reduce errors and provide visibility before going out to bid or out to permit. These coordination milestones allow for recommendations, changes, and develop strategies for deviations that might be required later on. The more parties you can involve in these milestones, the better. More eyes on the process. This will help lessen RFIs later, lessen change orders, especially in remodels with these adaptive reuse constructions that are happening. A lot of times we don't know what we don't know on this is demoed. So being ready for that by coordinating earlier in the process helps alleviate some headaches later on. And then I will throw it back over to Nick for entitlements and permitting, the next phase.
Thank you, Peter. And as we look to tie all of this together, we know that entitlements and permitting often create probably some of the biggest pain points in construction programs and program rollouts. When consulting with clients, oftentimes we discuss the importance of predictability in this segment of the work, even more than talking about reducing agency time, which is great when it can happen. It's just, that's not always something you can cause. But the way we view it is you really should always be able to prevent it from taking longer than it's supposed to. And one other element to that is oftentimes once you get your real time savings and very good due diligence and establishing of a schedule and good program stacking. But once that individual project is set, early approvals, well, great. Sometimes it's hard to pull everybody forward, but conversely, if it's later than the approval was supposed to be, almost without question, it costs money for a variety of reasons. For materials, contractor, staging, the hiring, personnel issues, lost sales, et cetera. So with that early investigation, we really want an individual site-based strategy to navigate efficiently through the approvals process that'll be necessary. And we'll be considering jurisdictional priorities. Where can we partner up? Where can we get something that gives something to get something? How well can we negotiate? How long will certain things take? And very importantly, a comprehensive view of the scope. That's important to know because certain elements affect other elements, and not all submittals in these processes. There's different submittals at different times. And the city is viewing one project. Oftentimes we might be viewing, or folks on the phone, if I'm the architect, well, if civil's got that, that's not my submittal. The jurisdictions don't care. They see one site really. And so it's important to keep all of those in mind. And then one other thing I want to highlight here is the thinking about things like, hey, can these processes be concurrent? If yes, great. Should they be? Do we want to take that risk or not? It is making those decisions sort of up front with good information. Last thing I'll emphasize here, and then we'll move around, is from my point of view, most delays, lion's share of delays in entitlement and permitting process really boil down to being affected by sometimes poor quality of submittal or not actively managing the transitions. So to pick up time here, active engagement, forward-looking engagement. Who's up next? Are they ready? The day I get a first-round revisions, is the person that's going to make those comments, are they ready for it? Are they on schedule to turn that around fast, like a hot potato? And then next action. Keeping stagnation out of this honestly drives these processes probably than most other things. So I'll leave it there for today, and we'll turn back to Tommy, and we'll have some Q&A. Tommy?
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Peter. We appreciate your insight today. We thought we'd wrap up with some real-life case studies where we can actually share some of the reality of what's been discussed today. 7-Eleven was a very interesting program. They came to us specifically about a flagship remodel program and took us to their San Diego site to review what could the process look like for the fleet. What we found out and what we got in the middle of very quickly was the opportunity to show them the strength of reality capture, the ability to show them what was truly built in each location standalone, not assuming that one site matches another site. That reality capture detail led into true as-built architecture, construction drawings that could be priced correctly, scheduled correctly, planned for correctly, materials could be ordered correctly, sizes down to the 1/8 of an inch to make sure there were no surprises when the program actually kicked off. Through the partnership with 7-Eleven, Sevan was able to build a 3-week program model executed in the San Diego site, and this flagship store is still used as the key for their ongoing remodel program. Walgreens, they've been a very long-term partner with us. They came to us with the concept of building clinics, village medical clinics, a very large number of them across the country. Again, reality capture was the key to kicking off a successful program. There were a large number of sites, 530 as you can see, to be hit, and not just hit, but actually hit twice. We did the true reality capture LiDAR scans of the site to do the pre-con planning and assessment, and then post the construction, we came back and did the reality capture again So post the construction, each site had a true as-built drawing that could be used, as Nick and Peter have mentioned, in the future for any remodels or changes. The actual picture for each site stood alone. We're very excited about our partnership with IKEA. We do a lot of remodel work for them, but I wanted to focus on one program because of the detail involved. We have just kicked off a national restroom remodel program where they are taking their 2 existing very large restrooms that are side by side and turning them into one very large gender neutral restroom. So the wet walls were having to be torn down, relocation of basically all the plumbing into new locations, sinks. Now there will be enclosures for each of the toilet areas. The detail of exactness of what each site actually looked like, again, led to the reality capture that then led into Sevan's ability to execute accurate construction drawings by site, estimates for construction that were true to the site based on the reality of the existing conditions. All of this led to a smaller budget and a much smaller timeline than IKEA expected. The story you've heard today is many facets to how you can speed through the retail construction process. The technology, the policies, the processes, and how the 3 departments blend between CZP, reality capture, and architecture is the story we wanted to convey today, and we hope we've answered some of those questions for you. I wanted to add one more slide just because it does play a key part in Sevan's role and in our life every day, and it's specifically about safety. Safety can play also a very key role in how quickly and how efficiently a program runs. All it takes is one major oops or injury to delay a project, stop a project in its tracks. We focus very, very heavily on safety, and we see that as a key part of how a successful and a sped up process occurs in the retail world. We thank you for your time today. We've seen that there have been a number of questions submitted, so we're going to move on to the last part of our program today, which is answering some questions. So I will hand it back to the team. And Marjorie, if you can help us. I don't think we can hear you.
Sorry about that. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, sorry. First question, what is the minimum you require from the client regarding project scope to allow you to conduct a thorough due diligence permit investigation report? Typically, that info is lacking and causes incomplete or inconsistent information from the AHJ.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Marianne. And I'll start here with, there's kind of 2 philosophies you could take with investigation. And one is to say that regardless of work scope, I kind of know generally what the intention of the program or project is. And I'm going to do a broad review of the various agencies that would be involved: building, health, fire, planning, zoning, maybe transportation might be involved, utilities, et cetera. And I'm going to lay out sort of a general sense of what's allowable and then let work scope fit into that. And there are occasions that can be effective. More often than not, though, people have clients have a very good idea in mind of what they want. And project by project really want to know is, how long is this going to take me? What's it going to cost? And am I going to get approved? And so from that standpoint, if you think about a good conceptual site plan and floor plan elevations, it's important to note if there's going to be exterior modifications or different initiatives on the site that that change that A, could change the use, or B, just could change site circulation or those conditions. That would help guide the person investigating to know which departments they're going to flow through and where to focus their investigations. So we think about, obviously, a site plan, a floor plan, elevations, exterior in particular, and then from there, anything else that can be given is a plus, but that often would be enough to get a decent work scope.
Yeah, I think spot on what you're saying, Nick. And a good way to, and the client won't always, you don't have all the information at your disposal. So what we like to do is we break down our due diligence phase 1, phase 2. Phase 1 is we go to a jurisdiction, with the general scope of work, mostly a lot of it is narrative. We talk with the jurisdiction we take a look what disciplines will be required in review, like Nick mentioned. But also we determine like Nick said, how is that narrative and how is that intended use going to affect parking, affect the outside, affect the mechanical systems that might already be there. So we kind of get a very generic sense from the jurisdiction just based off the narrative. And then phase 2, you want to come back with what Nick said, some preliminary elevations, preliminary floor plans that really give more insight to the jurisdiction. So my recommendation would be break it down into 2 phases, because then you want to get as much information up front when you're starting a project.
Okay, thanks. Let's go on to the next question. How early in the process should I start working on permitting?
Boy, it's almost as though permitting is a problem for a lot of people. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, it is for all of us. This is a good question, and as early as possible. It kind of leads. This is a good question to follow the last one, which is, yes, ideally you want as much information as you can get to do a really good, thorough investigation and get predictable timelines. But you also want to investigate as early as possible, because that'll be driving decisions. And especially if you think about the variability of projects, we go all the way back to the beginning of this conversation, design trends and the different initiatives coming. Is EV going to be part of my offering? Do I have outdoor spaces here? Are there entitlements or planning zoning issues that are going to take separate submittals in time? Or am I going straight to building, health, fire, or maybe in some cases simply trade permits, and I can move fast? The earlier that investigation occurs, balanced by at least having the information that can help drive a good investigation, but that really then creates the client with the best ability to plan and stack and execute that program as accelerated and efficiently as possible.
Okay, here's another question. My projects will have exterior changes. Is that going to affect my permitting process and the timeline?
Probably hit on that already a little bit, but okay. It's a good question. I will just emphasize, it is really important when everything is interior. Usually it's going to take you a certain set of processes and focus building, health, fire. When you have exterior changes, you always have to be careful and kind of assume that that's going to take you into planning or zoning or architectural review boards, or you really got to be on the lookout, because those are things that you just won't get off first base without dealing with, and they can really blow your project up if you're not cognizant of them.
Yep. And a lot of times, zoning and planning will give their approvals first. Sometimes building review won't even start until zoning approves it. So if you have a change during the permitting process and you're already in the building permitting phase, if you make a change, that's going to get thrown back to zoning, which will delay your process. So if you're going to make changes, best to make changes before you submit for permitting. Or there is also a conversation later to do a permit amendment if the schedule allows it for later, so that you can keep progressing through the permitting process.
Okay, here's someone else wants to know, how important is a prototype and is it necessary?
I can start up on this one. I think from our whole presentation today, prototyping is very important and very beneficial, especially on programs that have multi-sites and you know that you're going to be working on multiple projects moving forward. One-offs, not as important, but the more you can have a prototype, it's standardized, the quicker you're going to move through construction document development, the less questions there will be, the less surprises that will pop up. So very important. And what should be standardized?
Yeah.
The interior usually does not change. It might be molded a little bit to the site adapt, but usually the interior elements will not change. So if you can have those standardized, that will help you along the way. For on the exterior side, if you can standardize accent elements, signage, feature walls, even drive-through components, the more you can standardize that, the quicker you're going to get it integrated into the drawings across all projects moving forward.
Yeah, Peter, the one thing I would add to that is also thinking about a prototype. You can develop with a prototype kind of pre-planned options, and we talked earlier about decision trees, and so thinking about if there's exterior components and using something like Revit Design Options tool, we might have kind of preset, if this, then that, or different equipment initiatives. If I got to add something here, then I've kind of got that preset and templatized. So the prototype, can be expansive to kind of cover down on lots of potential options that can come into play. So.
Spot on.
Okay, well, I think we've run out of time, and I really want to thank our speakers for sharing their insights and expertise on this really important topic with us. And thanks to Sevan again for sponsoring the webinar. And thanks to all of our attendees for devoting time to be with us today. One last thing. Remember that this webinar will shortly be available on demand, so you can listen to it again if there are things you want to check back on, and you can share it with your colleagues. I think that's about it. I hope everyone has a great day.